It's interesting. We haven't really talked about the state of men today, and you see it more in America than I see it here. I feel like America is worse than here. Also, I'm in a bubble here too, Connor, because I'm doing my own show, and I got people like Pena and Kiyosaki that come on and don't give a fuck and say whatever they say, which I know is not the normal out there. No one comes on my show and even says the phrase toxic masculinity. And so I don't think I even understand what most young men have to deal with when it comes to suppressing all of their, inner feelings. All I can do is create my own media that goes against that. But I don't realize what you said, and then that leads, of course, to isolation and all those other things. And I don't know what to do about that. Part of me believes we're seeing new figures emerge, maybe in the past 5 years, that are being celebrated, like the Jockos and the Jordan Petersons and maybe the Rogans and others, where you actually at least have some champions that people can look to. But at the same time, maybe the mainstream media and big tech and most of the media is giving the opposite message. So even though I can point to a few, you could argue that 90% of the men out there aren't consuming that content. And I don't know what to do about it except go back to the family and the father figure or the Jordans, Petersons of the world. I'm curious what you think about that, and am I getting it right?
Yeah, I think you have the pulse. You're on the pulse of something that's happening. I think I've said this before, but I think we've entered into a time for one of the first times in modern history, or maybe history in general, where what it means to be a man, what it means to be good at being a man, and what it means to be masculine is not being defined by men. It's largely being defined by culture and women. And so a lot of men have outsourced, and this isn't an attack on women. It's not an attack on feminism or anything like that. It's just a statement about what's happening for men, where there's an outsourcing of their masculinity, an outsourcing of the validation and the verification that they are a good man to external sources, to culture, to society, to women, to structures within our culture and society. And so, and part of that is that we have demonized the male role model, right? So like the guys that you listed off, there's a lot of people within, North America, within Western culture and society that would say, well, none of those men are good examples of male role models. They are all toxically masculine, and this is the narrative that's being really put forward in Western culture, specifically in America, right? I mean, There was an article about how working out was a right-wing thing to do, right? Being in shape was somehow toxic and misogynistic. And you're like, how did you get to the place where working out is misogyny? Like what happened? So, so there's kind of a dissonance. And I think what a lot of young men are experiencing is a couple things. Because I'm fortunate enough to talk to men of all age ranges from all over the world. Like on my show, people from Australia, guys from the UK, guys from Europe and Africa and Asia, like they all tune in. And so I get to hear a very broad spectrum of what men are dealing with and being challenged by, which I do not take for granted. But what a lot of young men say when they reach out to me or when I read their YouTube comments or whatever, is a couple of things are happening. Number one, I don't feel like culture and society wants or needs me at all. I don't feel needed or wanted. I don't feel like women need or want me or even like me because I'm male. I don't feel like culture needs or wants me. And I don't feel like society sees the challenges that I'm facing inherently. And then the last piece is I don't feel like I can talk about my issues as a man because it somehow makes the issues that women are facing be threatened, right? And so this sort of cognitive dissonance happens where we can't talk about men's issues without sort of acknowledging that women have their own issues, or we can't talk about men's issues and advocate for what men are going through without a lot of women coming out and saying, well, women have it bad too. Women have their own challenges. So those two things can coexist. And I think the last thing is a lot of young men are growing up in an economy that is different from their parents. And so they're struggling to get the job. They're struggling to get the education without being bludgeoned to death by debt. In America, like getting a 4-year degree, you're going to come out with $150,000 worth of debt for a job that's going to pay you 50 grand. So I think a lot of young men, they feel very disincentivized to do the things that men have normally done, which is persevere, work hard, develop resiliency, go and do hard shit, because the outcome is like, well, what am I going to do all that for? I'm going to do all that for debt, women that don't like me, and a society that's telling me that I should just sit down and be quiet and fade off into oblivion. So I think a lot of young men are frustrated, and you can see it online. You can see it in the conversation, and I get it. I get why they're upset. It's that doesn't mean that it's okay to speak in ways that are hateful towards women or minorities or anything like that. But I get why young men are really upset and sort of disenfranchised and pissed off. And they're checking out. They're really checking out from society at large. And, something that Scott Galloway said is that we're producing the most amount of men who are ineligible for women to date and ineligible for the workplace in modern history. And that's a problem, because when you have men who aren't making money and don't have viable mating prospects, they're usually angry and dangerous. And so we need to do something to bring these men back into the fold. And I don't want to paint like a really dramatic picture, but a lot of men are just, disenfranchised and upset.
Wow. Yeah, look, that all makes sense. And the men that I mentioned that are my mentors, they're all being literally canceled by big tech. And so those messages are being suppressed. And so you're right, culturally, and our gatekeepers in Silicon Valley, which represent part of that culture, and women, like you said, to a certain extent, are defining the new masculinity, and that's a dangerous place to be. And I can see why men feel that way, and that's a dangerous outcome. I think it was Peterson or a few other people said that the most dangerous man is actually the man that you want around is a dangerous man who can control himself. What you don't want around is someone who is that angry, frustrated person who feels powerless. That is actually a more dangerous person. And I think we've seen that, and I think you see that in the school shooters and all the people that are kind of go off the reservation. They're not that strong alpha that has it in control. They're people that are disenfranchised and frustrated with the system they've been given. Because if you're, I guess, a young man today, you're given this conundrum, like, what am I supposed to do? Now, you might sit them down, my mentors would sit them down and say, okay, be a man and go this way and hold the North Star. And if you do that with congruency, then you will find what you need. But first of all, no one's telling them that. And also that takes some fortitude and that takes a commitment. And, and so it's not obvious that that's how the people are going to actually go there and get there.
How do you get out of a rat race? How do you create wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come after?
I am absolutely amazed with the quality of companies that we're getting exposure to.
We go on to Zoom calls with the innovators and the folks who are building new applications in metaverse, blockchain, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance.
What's going on, everybody? Thumbs up if you can see me.
We are focusing on early stage investment.
And the quality of people that we're getting exposure to, whether it be Dan Tapiero with 1RT, Jason Ma from Open, Yatsu from Animoca.
It's been a phenomenal experience thus far. It has far exceeded my expectations.
We are focusing on cutting edge technologies.
I view it now as the best investment I've ever made. The upside I view is unlimited.
And as a retail investor, I would never get this exposure anywhere else outside of Investment Club.
See you in the Investment Club.